problem 10.4, we're going to help Claire calculate some input and output values for this function here, f of x equals 6 divided by x minus 2. So we're told that Claire ran into some trouble as she was running through these calculations, so we're going to try to help her out. Now, all that I must do in this first part is plug in some of these numbers and see what we get. So if I want to find, for example, f of negative 10, or I want to plug in negative 10 to f of x, I get 6 over negative 10 minus 2. That's the same as 6 over negative 12. And I know that 6 over 12 is the same as a half, so this is just negative 1/2. So far, so good. If I want to find f of 0, well, that's just 6 over 0 minus 2. 0 minus 2 is negative 2, so it's 6 over negative 2. I can do that division there. 6 divided by negative 2 is negative 3. And we can keep going with this. If I plug in, I'm going to come over to the side here. If I plug in f of 1/2, that's 6 over 1/2 minus 2. Well, I know that 1/2 minus 2 is negative 1.5, or negative 1.5. And I recognize here that 1.5 goes into 6 4 times, so this just comes out as negative 4. Now we'll keep going. F of 2, this is 6 over 2 minus 2, which is 6 over 0. Now this one's kind of weird because I don't think we can divide by 0, so I'm not exactly sure what this is going to give us here. I can't get an answer right away. Okay, and then we can try the last one, f of 8. That's 6 over 8 minus 2, which is the same as 6 over 6, which is just 1. So we've got a bunch of our answers here, except we couldn't figure out that output value when our input was 2. That didn't seem to work. So let's go ahead and look at the graph here and see what happens. Maybe that'll help us. So I'm going to come over to Desmos, and I'm going to put in f of x equals 6 over x minus 2. I'm going to input that function there. And what I notice right off the bat is that if I look at x equals 2, it doesn't seem like my graph actually ever hits x equaling 2. I have all these points here. They all work fine. Like there's f of 0 giving me negative 3 as an answer. But when I try to get to x equals 2, no matter how much I zoom out and trace along this line here, I can't seem to get all the way to x equals 2. So it's almost like there's this gap on the graph at x equals 2. The graph gets close but never touches it. So that's another interesting feature there. Let's see if a calculator can help us out a little bit more maybe. So let's come over here to our calculator and let's try to do 6 divided by, I'm going to use parentheses to group the denominator, 2 minus 2. Hit enter. Okay, and here I'm getting an error. It says I'm trying to divide by 0, which we already knew, but it says that the calculation fails. So the calculator can't figure out what 6 divided by 0 is. So that kind of confirms what we remembered before. I can't divide by 0, so I'm getting an error here because of that division by 0. So in this case, it seems like even though I can plug in pretty much any number to this, right? All of these numbers seem to work perfectly fine. All of these numbers seem to work perfectly fine. I can't plug in 0. Or sorry, I can't plug in 2 because that ends up dividing by 0. So for my domain, right, which remember is my inputs, it seems like I can use any number except x equals 2. And this happens for some functions. In this case, it was specifically 2, but in other functions, it might be other numbers that give us issues like dividing by 0.